Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome.
Welcome.
This is the 2025 Lodging Tax Advisory Committee Grants webinar. And my name is Shelley Levins. I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing and the staff liaison to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee here at the City of Port Townsend. And I'm joined by
Owen Rowe, and I am a council member at Port Townsend City Council, and one of my roles on council is to be the council liaison and the chair of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. So we'll take a quick look at our agenda for this afternoon, and then we'll start right into it. And I'll do the first half and then pass it back to Shelley for the second half. So here's what we're going to talk about today. The first half that I'll cover really is about what is the Lodging Tax Committee and where does our money come from and how do we spend it. And a lot of that is governed by state laws as well as, of course, the decisions of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee and the City Council. So we'll go through that, and then Shelley will cover a little bit of our budget for 2025 to put some context around what these grants are intended for, and then get into the details of how to apply for the grant, what the committee is going to be looking for in an application, and some suggestions that can help you be successful and put on a great project with the support of the lodging tax grant. And then once we're done with all of that, we'll have some time for Q&A if there are any questions. And of course, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the city's website or through the city's website within a few days. So if you miss the live webinar, then we hope you're watching the recording and we look forward to reviewing your application. All right, so let's get into the details. The Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, that's what LTAC stands for. It's a city advisory board, and that means it's residents of the city and nearby areas who are appointed by the mayor with the approval of city council. They're volunteers who serve the purpose of stewarding these funds. So the lodging tax is collected as part of sales tax on lodging establishments. And this is something that is allowed by state law. A city or a county municipality can decide to impose a lodging tax, and it's collected with the sales tax and then sent to the city periodically. And the city then can invest that money within specific guidelines that the state allows. So lodging refers to accommodations of less than 30 days. So this is short-term rentals, hotels, motels, beds and breakfasts, etc., as well as campgrounds, of course. But it doesn't include long-term stays or regular housing rentals. So it's only for transient lodging, as one of the terms is. And that's both public and private. So campgrounds at state parks, they pay the lodging tax. Okay. So on the lodging tax committee that I've been involved with for a couple of years, we've developed a vision for how we want to use these funds for Port Townsend. And our vision, of course, it's still centered around tourism and the visitor economy, but we want to reinvest the money that's collected from our visitors and reinvest those resources to enhance the lives of both residents and visitors. So this is not intended to be turning Port Townsend into something that is only for tourists or only for visitors. We want to make it better for everybody. And that includes, of course, the businesses in the hospitality industry, as well as all of the residents of Port Townsend who will also enjoy events and programs that are supported by the lodging tax. So a little bit about who the lodging tax committee is. So it's defined in our city code. It has 11 voting members. There's one city councilor who acts as the chair, and that's me at the moment. There are two at-large members, that anybody in the community can apply for one of those seats. There are 4 seats that are reserved for collectors of the lodging tax, and that means essentially hospitality businesses, whether they're bed and breakfasts or hotels or campgrounds. So somebody representing one of those businesses that is collecting the tax, and then 4 seats that are reserved for recipients of the lodging tax. So these are the kinds of programs that the lodging tax has supported in the past through the grant program or through direct allocations. We also have some non-voting seats for longstanding partners such as Port Townsend Main Street, which has been working with the city for decades and to improve our downtown and uptown retail core and to produce a lot of great events and programs that as lodging tax also does, make it a better place for both residents and visitors. So I'll point out here that we do have a couple of openings. So we need 2 more collectors. Those are openings that we're particularly interested in. So hospitality businesses, please check out the committee on the City of Port Townsend webpage and talk to us if you have any questions. So the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee meets second Tuesdays of odd months. So January, March, May, July, September, November. It's on the second Tuesday of those months at 3 o'clock in City Council chambers. We sit around a table. We don't sit in the fancy chairs. And of course, those are public meetings, so you're welcome to drop in or you can watch them online. And all of the agendas and meeting materials are posted on the city website. And there's a link right there, which, of course, if you can't click on that in this webinar, it's right there on the city website. And those meetings have different purposes depending on where we are in the year. We're looking at budget or we're looking at planning for the year ahead. And the March meeting is going to be devoted to deciding about among grant applications. So that's the grants that we're introducing today, and we'll be making those decisions a month from now. So lodging tax, I said there's lots of different agendas for what happens in the meeting, but we also have some work groups that are really supporting the work of the larger committee, and so they meet at different times of the year. We have a group that is looking at the marketing of the city itself and is right now working with designers to help us produce a new identity and a new way of promoting Visit Port Townsend. We have the Visitor Information Services, which is providing information for visitors, and that's to step up to address some deficiencies where organizations have not been able to continue that service. So we want to really figure out something that's going to work in the short term and in the long term. We're also starting an emphasis on collecting data and really demonstrating the economic impact of the visitor economy for Port Townsend. This is something that anecdotally is very familiar and subject of conversation, but we really haven't had solid data to show how important it is and what kind of investment might make it even better. And we also have a work group that is looking at providing additional facilities for visitors, particularly a restroom downtown. So there is one at the Cotton Building, and we're looking for adding a new one. So I said earlier that lodging tax is governed by state law. So this is the revised Code of Washington. This is the state law. Section 67.28 covers lodging tax, and this is what allows a city or a county or other municipality to collect lodging tax on short-term rental facilities. So that money collected, it goes into a separate account, and the Lodging Tax Committee advises the city where to spend it. So usually what happens is the committee proposes a budget, which is then incorporated to the overall city budget, which that full city budget has to be approved by all of city council. So the Lodging Tax Committee, strictly speaking, is not making the final decision. The final decision always resides with council. But the state law does limit what that lodging tax money can be spent on. And here it is in small print. And of course, this is just a summary of the much larger section of code. It can be spent on tourism marketing and marketing and operations of special events and festivals designed to attract tourists. So that's one of the major goals of the granting program. Other things that it can be spent on include operations and capital expenditures of tourism-related facilities owned or operated by a municipality or public facilities district. And there are many places that do that. That might be something that supports our potential new downtown restroom. That would be a tourism-related facility owned or operated by a municipality. And then the third bullet point is operations of tourism-related facilities owned or operated by nonprofit organizations, but not capital expenditures. So that one could not build a new building, but that could help an organization provide services for tourism, such as visitor information services. So that's where that falls. So to really get the full picture, there's actually a definition of these terms included in the revised code. So tourism, tourism promotion, and tourism-related facility. So these can go to tourism organizations, nonprofits, cities or counties, but the goal is that they should be something that addresses tourists. So not just something that addresses locals. It doesn't mean that residents can't use it or can't have access to it, but the goal should be to bring visitors in. So in some ways, this lodging tax, which is collected on overnight stays, is then continuing to support that economy of bringing people in for overnight stays. And again, that doesn't mean that local residents can't also participate and enjoy the event or the program. So one of the ways to look at this is there a direct connection to somebody staying overnight? Or if not, one of the rubrics is, are you attracting people from more than 50 miles away? Now, 50 miles may not sound like a long distance to travel for an overnight stay, but if you look at the tourism patterns and also, of course, if you look at the geography of our area, 50 miles can be a trip of several hours, and many people will want to stay overnight at their destination if they're traveling 50 miles, including a ferry or winding around a body of water. So you get to Port Townsend, and if you've come from 50 miles away, that's considered a visitor, and that's what we want these programs to support. And let's see, do I have any more in my section?
I might just add one quick thing that we had talked about earlier, Owen, which would be that because you can see there's that practice tip example there.
Mhm.
Laws often still require assessment and understanding and interpretation. And that's where sometimes we'll request the assistance of the city attorney, or we'll often deliberate on lodging tax. Does this feel eligible? Is it not? And want to provide as clear of guidelines as possible to our community about what's eligible and not, but there are times when we do require an interpretation from the city attorney.
Yeah. But if you have a strong sense and you can demonstrate that you're really looking to bring people in from more than 50 miles away and that you're working with hospitality partners, those will be great strengths in an application.
Thank you
So,
so much.
yeah, I think that's it for my part, and I will hand it to Shelley. So take it away.
Thank you. That was a really great overview. So now you know what lodging tax is, who are the people currently on lodging tax, and what is a high-level overview of the law that governs how these funds are spent. So what are we talking about in terms of funds? In 2024, lodging tax revenue was $625,000. In 2023, lodging tax was around $640,000. And typically year over year, our lodging tax advisory committee does budget for spending less than what they anticipate will come into the fund. What has resulted from that sort of prudent and financially stable kind of model for budgeting for lodging tax has resulted in quite a healthy reserve. Now, one of the things that lodging tax has talked about for quite some time, or the committee has talked about for quite some time, what would be some special infrastructure projects or a big project that we might want to take on that would require a large one-time expense of the lodging tax reserve. So that's been tossed around for quite some time. And so what we're looking at this year is actually spending down some of that reserve because the committee has decided we're ready to hit the go button on some of these projects that they've held off on. So this is not in detail at all, but the annual budget, which includes the $50,000 for the grant funding this year, is currently budgeted at $600,000. That's everything from marketing to the annual winter lighting program that we do, to supporting our visitor information services, to staff time. So those are all year over year expenses that come out of the lodging tax budget that we would expect to continue to incur year over year. The 2025 special projects budget is what I was referencing in terms of tapping into that reserve fund. So some of those things are the part one of what we believe will be a new downtown restroom project. You saw that on the work group list. That's a brand new group that's coming together to talk about what's possible, where, how, and all of those notes from those work groups, I'll note, do flow back up into the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee's meeting minutes or meeting packets, so that they can see and discuss any of the materials that have been happening at the work group. So that's a piece of what's in the special projects budget. Other pieces are things like a website upgrade, that's a one-time expense. The rebrand for our brand destination brand identity, that's a one-time expense. So that kind of thing is being folded into that special projects budget. So grant funding in 2025 is 50,000. In 2024, it was 40,000. So the committee did vote to request to council an increase in this grant funding portion. Partly because the committee did see quite a number of applications that were eligible, that were excellent projects, that needed to have partial funding awarded or did not receive funding because of the competitive nature of and the funding pool being smaller than the request pool. So we did, or they did increase that slightly this year. So this is, I'm gonna return to this slide. To click through and we'll go through the application in this webinar. But before I do that, let's look at some of the things that you as an applicant, if you choose to apply, will want to compile beforehand. So one thing that's really important to know about anything that you're submitting to the city, even if you're sending an email, or if you're submitting a packet of materials as part of your application, is that it becomes part of what's called the public record. And public records are available to anyone to request and look at. In this case, these documents for your grant application will find their way into the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee's meeting packet. And that meeting packet is a big PDF document that the committee reviews and then is sort of a part of that meeting that will occur. So that's important to know, that any of your submissions are public documents, and that the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee often likes to utilize some good examples from past applications, as I will do in a moment, as you'll see, in order to help future applicants kind of get a sense for what we're looking for. So we'll look at 3 different sample materials that you'll want to compile before and after then you apply for a grant, and if you receive one. So this is an example of the marketing budget. So in terms of projects that are eligible, it can be, you can be talking about a whole project and then you're asking for a piece of the marketing for that project. That can be one way that it's presented, or it can be that you have, in this case, Centrum's season of events, and they're not asking for or providing all of the documentation around that entire season of events. What they're providing is the marketing plan for specific events within their season. And this is just the budget for that marketing plan. So it's still a budget that shows how lodging tax fundings, the intention for how it would be spent and what the total budget is. So just important to show how you would be using the funding, what portion of the total project or total marketing plan you're requesting. That's important for us to be able to see. You can format the budget in any way that you would like, as long as it's clear. And we do offer a template that you can use if you would like. So here's another example of a project budget. So here are the estimated income and then the estimated expenses, and you can see that one of the questions on the application that we'll see in a moment is, do you have any additional funding that you're either requesting or that's secured as part of your project? And so this is another place you might talk about that in the narrative. This is another place to show where else you're getting funding for your project. So this is an example of the First Night event, which is a New Year's Eve program operated by the Production Alliance. And then I wanted to show this example right up front, because one of the things that's important to us this year and moving forward is to help our applicants understand that before you apply, having the expectations already in place, that you will need to be reporting some pretty specific data that we're asking for. And this is in compliance with state law. This is a reporting form that actually gets sent off to the state, compiled into a report by our city finance department. And so this is showing that we are using our lodging tax funds in the way that they're intended to be used, and that our grantees are collecting the kind of data that the state is interested in, and certainly our local lodging tax is interested in. So this is the lodging tax reporting form. This is something that you would receive a blank copy of before, or if you were awarded a grant. And it's really instructive when we start to think about what needs to be reported, and we'll come back to this. So just showing you an example of 3 different documents that are part of this process. Important to note as well that this year, as opposed to last year, there is just 1 round of grant funding. So we are trying to get the word out as much as we can right now, because on Monday, March 3rd, it is the deadline for submitting an application to lodging tax for a portion of that $50,000. The Lodging Tax Advisory Committee's meeting is Tuesday, March 11th at 3 p.m. And all applicants and the public, anyone interested, is invited to attend that meeting. And that is typically in that meeting is where the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee would make the decisions about how the grant funds will be allocated. But it's not a guarantee. There are a couple of things that could occur that may prevent a decision in that meeting. One might be that if the committee does not have quorum, they would not be able to vote. Other extenuating circumstances. They may not be able to come to a decision by the end of the meeting, and in that case, they may extend and call a special meeting. So, but very likely that is when, on Tuesday, March 11th is when either attendees or those who are viewing the recording afterward would learn about their grant. The follow-up from that then is that city staff do reach out to every applicant and let you know whether your application was declined or if you were awarded a grant. And the contracting process starts from there. Okay, so before we go into the grant review process, we're going to go back to our, right. Can you see that, Owen? Can you see it?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, now.
Fantastic.
Great.
Okay, so this is the city's website. And this is your one-stop shop for all things lodging tax related. I'm going to show you how to get there in a moment. What you're going to do is go to the city's homepage and you can bookmark this, cityoft.us. It's nice and easy to remember, nice and short, and go to government, the government tab, and you'll see all the boards and commissions here. Scroll down to Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, and there you are on the page. So here's about the committee. You'll see our vision. There's where you can reference the RCW and some information about that. The list of Lodging Tax Advisory body members that Owen went over, the open positions, and at the bottom of this page is the link to apply for a Lodging Tax Advisory Committee position if that interests you. Also, really important, email if you have any questions along the way. Or are just wondering throughout the year how to get in touch, this is the email that you would use, ltac@citypt.us. Okay, so going down here, this is the information that I just provided, these important dates and deadlines, the amount of funding. And one thing that we will want you to do before you apply is read the grant guidelines and FAQ. So they're linked here. It is a lot of what we're talking about essentially today, but really important that you look these over, digest them, talk about them with your colleagues if you're part of an organization before you spend time in the application. We want to make sure that's a really good use of your time. So this is going to go through all the attachments that are required, and it also lays out the narrative questions for you in advance. So you're able to draft those narratives in another document and then cut and paste or copy and paste into the application. It can help you, rather than write directly into the application, it can just help make that process a lot smoother and often does result in a better application. So that's, those are the guidelines. And then we've got some frequently asked questions here around eligibility and when, and that the grants are reimbursable is a very important note. So you will need to, if you're planning to apply to a lodging tax grant, you will need to ensure that you have funding up front in order to pay for those expenses that were funded, because the grants can only be paid out once you have expended what you intended to expend and told us that you would, and then you invoice the city for a reimbursement. So that's a very important note here. Please do go through these, I think it's only 5 pages, so go through the grant funding guidelines and FAQ before you apply. The other thing to take a look at before you apply are the required and desired grant criteria. So we're going to look at these right now and go through them one by one. So you do need to be a designated 501c3 nonprofit organization, or be an organization that has a nonprofit fiscal agent. And in order to be eligible for lodging tax funding, we do require that documentation as part of the application. So make sure that you have that ready to go. We will also require, so these are divided into a couple of different categories here: the required criteria for your organization, the required criteria for your proposal, and then the desired criteria for your proposal. So in terms of the organization, we want to be able to see and know that you have the ability to utilize the LTAC grant for its intended purpose, and that you will be able to spend those funds within the calendar year that they were awarded. So this is an important distinction, because sometimes you have an event or a marketing plan that spans a year. It might go from 2025 into 2026, or you might be looking at a 2026 initiative, but you need to kick off that initiative in 2025 and spend some funds. Oftentimes when we look at marketing dates and deadlines, those are pretty far out. They're often several months out from when that marketing piece actually hits the streets. So this is helpful to understand, because if you are awarded a lodging tax advisory committee grant, you need to be able to spend those funds within 2025 this year. The project doesn't necessarily have to complete within this year. And we're willing, this is sometimes a sticky issue for folks, so we're absolutely willing to answer questions and talk through and troubleshoot what you're thinking about. And so just be sure to email ltac@cityofpt.us if you're wondering whether what you're thinking is going to fit the parameters. We talked about you need to be willing to accept a reimbursable grant, and willing to accept partial funding if needed. We have found through these last couple of years of funding lodging tax grants that partial funding is often how the committee is splitting the pie among all of the applicants that are, and it's not necessarily that it'll always be partial funding, but we do require that you're at least willing to, because that has been historically what has occurred. We do also require that you're willing to utilize the City of Port Townsend's destination brand identity on your digital and print materials, and that you'll recognize the City of Port Townsend's lodging tax as a funder of your project. And so this sometimes is shown on a website or another print piece as a mention with a logo in a sponsorship or a funding supporter section. So it's not uncommon for funders to require this. We want to make sure our community knows what we're supporting and that that's provided out there. You also, as we looked at that state reporting form, right, and we'll go through some of those details in a bit on what you need to be able to collect, but you do need to be willing and able to collect that visitor data and be willing and able to submit the final report for your organization. Okay, so then for your proposal, we require that you show us how you plan to increase the number of overnight stays in Port Townsend lodging per the RCW. So this is required by state law that you are providing that information. Will you increase the number of overnight stays? That's something we need you to think about and then discuss within your application. We're interested in proposals that have a strategy for providing additional visitations to Port Townsend in the off-season. So this is a strategic move by LTAC to try to drive additional overnight stays into the months that essentially span October through May or October through June in that window. Port Townsend has so many amazing events in the summertime. We know that our lodging is often full in the summertime. So we're looking to really push and drive some of that visitor traffic into the off season. It also, it drives well with the committee's interest in sustainable tourism. You need to show in your marketing plan, if that's what you're applying for, that you're documenting that this marketing, the money that you're spending on the marketing is being used for something that is reaching people 50 or more miles away. So Owen mentioned that earlier. That's really important. So we have some cool local news sources, right? We've got our local radio station, we've got our local newspaper. Those would not be, in terms of how you would be spending dollars from your lodging tax grant, those would not be eligible uses because they really aren't reaching people 50 or more miles away. When we're talking about news outlets in the I-5 corridor or up in Victoria or Vancouver, BC, those would be eligible places to be spending those marketing dollars. We'd like to see that you're considering sustainability in the planning of the project or event. So sustainability is written into the vision of the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. And so it's now required for proposals and projects and events and marketing that you're thinking about that you're considering. What does sustainability mean for this project or proposal? And how am I participating in that conversation? That's important to us. That you're considering locals and visitors as your audience. Again, we go back to that lodging tax vision, and it is about increasing overnight stays in our community and thinking about the visitor economy. But we're always thinking about locals too and residents too. So we want to see that you're also doing that this isn't just something that is just for visitors, but locals are being considered as part of the proposal. It does need to be open to the public, whatever the project, program, or event is. And we would like it to have a free or low cost option for participation. So that accessibility, you'll see the next line down, physical or otherwise, is planned for in the project or event. So you're thinking through the accessibility challenges people might have in getting to your event, understanding what it's about, or that accessibility within your marketing strategy. We'd love to see that. So thinking those things through, and then if it is an event for which you're applying, that it does need to be open to the public. Okay. Now, what we would like to see, those are all things that we are requiring. What we would like to see, we have decided to score these desired criteria. Now, what the score represents is not guaranteed funding if you end up with the highest score in comparison to the other proposals. It is, though, a methodology that allows us to do some comparison and see, okay, based on our desired criteria, who is scoring the highest and why? It's a great touch point for discussion. It allows the committee, in the very short amount of time they have, to digest what can be very lengthy, meaty proposals and really think about them in a more high-level way. So each of these things may be focused on or discussed within the committee's deliberation on March 11th. The staff recommendation for a score is not necessarily the final recommendation and is not necessarily a guarantee of being either declined or awarded funding. It's another tool that we can use in our tool belt to help make these decisions. So one of the things that we've looked at is that a number of applicants have been applying to lodging tax year over year. we would like to invite new applicants into the process. We want to see more of our community participating in this work. And so we do have an additional point provided for if you have not received a City of Port Townsend Lodging Tax Award in the past year. We are not barring organizations from applying year over year. That is not something the committee decided to do. But we do want to encourage new applicants or applicants to wait a year before they come back to the committee, given our pool of funding is quite small. And that your organization has a track record of project and event success. This is not required because sometimes there are new organizations that are forming and they may not have gotten their project going yet. So we're actually quite interested in being incubators for new ideas, hearing what people are interested in doing. But it's helpful if the organization does have that track record. And can point to that as like, here's the things that have worked in the past, here's what we learned. And that you're creating local jobs and utilizing local vendors is very important to the Lodging Tax Committee, right? That is a 3-point desired criteria. So talking about that and showing that is important. That you reflect partnerships with local lodging businesses. We are not requiring this. However, we really would love as many as possible of our event producers and nonprofit organizations. If you're thinking about applying for lodging tax, think about where might my target audience stay? And could I potentially form a partnership with a lodging business or multiple lodging businesses to see how we can work together? That kind of relationship building as part of our visitor economy is important to lodging tax and to the committee. So we did have this as new criteria this year. We looked at those sample budgets earlier for a project and for a marketing plan, and both of them show that they're leveraging matching or in-kind funds and have other sources of funding. That is important to the committee, and so that is why it's scored with a 3. A new or less than 3-year offering to Port Townsend is something the committee has signaled as interesting, as I talked about before, and would be encouraged. That the project or event occurs over more than one day is important because if it's over more than one day, people are encouraged to stay overnight. So it's not a requirement. A 1-day event is still fundable. However, if it occurs over more than one day, we've found that people tend to stay. And when your project or event has over 100 participants, that does boost the percentage of people who might be utilizing lodging. Lastly, that the project or event is building on a longer-term strategy, and that you're thinking about the broader Olympic Peninsula region and or statewide tourism as part of your event. This is some new criteria. We're thinking about what are our strategies for connectivity. We're in a relatively remote place. The Olympic Peninsula Tourism Commission has just released their master plan last year, and they have just a wealth of resources for people in this sector to connect. So we're really interested in that kind of collaborative connectivity across our region. How might people that are visiting Port Townsend also find something interesting to do in Sequim or Port Angeles or Forks? And so thinking about that broader Olympic Peninsula region is something we're encouraging our applicants to do and would love to see that show up. All right, those are the criteria. Owen, do you want to chime in for anything I've missed?
No, I don't think so. I think you've got it.
Great.
And now the application itself.
Here we go. Okay, this is our applicant portal. So you click into it from the directly from the website. We have our lovely tags in there. Hit start. And we'll just walk through this. I'm going to use my information. I'm going to use sample information just so that you can kind of just see this. We've already gone through a number of these items because this is pulling directly from those criteria that I just described. But it can be helpful, I think, just to go through this quickly. It's quite user-friendly, so I hope you find that it's also user-friendly. You put in today the date of your application, who you are, your title. I'm just gonna say comms and marketing. And we're interested in, this is just for data collection to kind of understand what's the scale of the organizations that are applying to lodging tax. This is something that the committee said they were interested in knowing. So you'll enter in whatever your organization's annual budget may be. And is your, I'm gonna put over 500,000 actually, is your organization designated as a nonprofit, or do you have a nonprofit fiscal agent? You will need to say yes to this question, right? This is one of those required criteria. And you'll be asked to upload the letter confirming your status at the end of the application. Is a staff or board member of your organization represented on LTAC? So as you heard Owen talking about, lodging tax is made up of recipients and collectors. And so we get into this space where some of the people applying for lodging tax grants are actually on the committee, or their organizations are represented on the committee. And that's the way the law has been set up. So until that changes, we're always going to find ourselves in this position of needing to understand who needs to recuse themselves from the discussion and vote, and how we're going to handle this this question of how we fairly distribute these funds and make these decisions. So this is an important question to answer. Have you received a grant in the past? Yes or no? We'll answer that. And then if you do say yes, you'll get a pop-up box here that will ask you when it was awarded and what grant you received. We've only been doing these grants for a couple of years, so hopefully that will be easy information for you to source. All right, so the project and event title. I'm just gonna use test, just so you can we can get through. When you see the star, that means it's required. You won't be able to leave these blank and move on and submit. So in this box here, we would like you to summarize your project or event. This is really helpful. A really brief summary is super helpful for the committee to pretty quickly understand, what are you trying to do? What would you like to do? It also, if you're awarded a grant, can be a great way for the city to really quickly summarize for the press or on Facebook to help announce your event, or in any number of ways to really quickly get access to that information. So this is what we might call the elevator pitch, or just a very brief summary. So I'm also just going to enter information there. This does have a character count, so it's going to prevent you from making it too long. For any of these boxes in the application portal, you can toggle them up and down using this little corner arrow bar, if you'd like to see. You'll put in the date or project range for your event. So if my event is occurring over the course of an entire weekend, I might say use each of the dates of the weekend, or however long the event is occurring. The name of the venue where the project or event will occur. I'm going to say the Cotton Building. Although this is the address for City Hall. It pre-populated that information for me. Washington State. Now down to the grant request summary. So that was just, this is sort of the basic information, the project summary. We're now looking at the grant request summary. The grant request is what you are asking lodging tax for versus your total project and event or marketing budget. So you'll enter that here, and then enter the total project or event or marketing budget here. So again, when we were looking at those sample budgets, you don't need to put in your whole organizational budget or your whole project budget. If it makes more sense to really show us the detail on just the marketing budget, that really is okay. That is all that we would need. Will the project or event or marketing plan move forward without LTAC funding? We would like to know, how reliant would you be on this funding? There are some cases where folks might be applying for 100% of what they need. So in that case, if funding didn't move forward, we would assume that the project would not move forward. So this is just another piece of information we're looking for. And would you accept partial funding? It is, you know, as we talked about earlier, often how the funds are divided. Will you be able to utilize the grant funds in the current calendar year? Talked about this. You do need to be able to say yes to that. And the LTAC grants are reimbursable grants. Are you able to cover those grant expenses up front? You do need to also be able to say yes to this. Now we're into the required project criteria. Is the project or event open to the public? It needs to be. We do prioritize funding for projects and events that also include one free or pay what you wish date or time and are accessible. So you can say yes to this, then this is going to pop up if you're charging admission. Is there at least one free or pay what you wish date or time? And then, is the project new to Port Townsend? We talked about that. How many people do you anticipate will access the project or event? Enter that information here. Is the project or event within the Port Townsend Creative District? This is a new question that we're asking on both the Port Townsend Arts Commission grants as well as the lodging tax grants to better understand how our creative district is activated, particularly activated by city funding and taxpayer funding. So if you aren't familiar with the Port Townsend Creative District, that's okay. You can say, I'm not sure, or you can look up information here on the Creative District's website. So we talk about our vision for sustainable tourism, and we have the 4 narrative questions that are provided in those guidelines. So be sure to read those guidelines, think about the narrative questions, and then you're going to come into this space and enter your information. So they are, we would like you to describe how your project will benefit the Port Townsend community and increase overnight stays in the shoulder seasons. So those are important required criteria. You're benefiting our community, increasing overnight stays, and then it's falling in the shoulder season. So please answer the questions thus. In this next question, you'll describe how your project or marketing strategy is thinking about travelers to the broader Olympic Peninsula region and or statewide tourism. And you have a link to the Olympic Peninsula Tourism Master Plan there. So we would like you to be thinking about how your strategy fits into the big picture. Next, we'd like you to provide a brief overview of your marketing strategy for the project or event. You'll also have an opportunity to upload the marketing plan. So this is just a brief overview. This isn't the entire marketing plan. We would love to see that plan, and you can upload that later. We would like to see how you're sharing, how your partnerships and platforms are uniquely positioned to amplify your marketing. And we'd like to see if you're working with other folks. So if you're doing any co-op marketing opportunities, those are really great things to tell us. And then please, lastly, explain how the city's funding will be used to support the goals of the project or event or marketing plan. So sometimes we've gotten applications where it's, I need this much and here's how much my project is, but we're not really sure what specifically the funding would be used for in terms of the targeted goals. So what is being made possible with this funding? This would be a place where you could share that track record of project success. And this is the place where you might discuss the ways you're thinking about equity, accessibility, and sustainability. So again, there are no character count limits on these. It looks very brief, but you can view it here, or you can just enter, cut, and paste that information right into the form. Here's where you're going to upload your 501c nonprofit status, then your project, event, and marketing budget, and your project or event marketing plan that is documenting how you intend to reach visitors 50 or more miles away. You have the opportunity to upload an optional supporting document as well. So that could be past marketing materials. You want to show how your project kind of look and feel that you're doing, or a photograph of a past event, or something that you're anticipating. Whatever that optional document may be, we wanted to provide that opportunity. Lastly, anything else that we didn't ask that you weren't able to provide as part of the application, this is the place to do that here at the end. Knowing too that you're invited to come to the committee and present for approximately 3 minutes. Again, that's not a requirement. This question is not required to be answered, but providing that extra opportunity to add a little something if you want to. Lastly, you'll hit apply. I don't think it'll let me because I've got all this content that I need to enter here, but you'll get to a final screen and you'll have the opportunity to send yourself a copy of this application so that you have it documented exactly what you submitted. If for whatever reason you do not receive the copy of that application, just reach out to us. We should have it on file and we can provide it to you. That would be easy to do. Or if you have trouble in the application itself, if something's not working right, or if you're confused about a question and what we're looking for, we're really happy to support folks through the process of applying and want to encourage that open communication. So that is the application. I'm going to stop. Well, actually, I think I can just move this over and go right back to my slideshow. So we're coming right up on our time. So we'll scoot through these last few. Oh, we looked at these. We went over this a bit. So this grant review process is inviting you to this meeting, not required. The committee will review the proposals and score the and look at the scores from the criteria and discuss the applicants in the context of the LTAC's vision and our goals. And then, as I said, decisions are made within the meeting. Wanted to give you a few examples of recent recipients for lodging tax grant funding. They really run the gamut of music festivals to marketing for our farmers market, to a big New Year's Eve festival, to collaborations on a theater event with a local lodging space, to a new and innovative wedding tour. So across the board, all kinds of things people are thinking about for utilizing lodging tax funds. A little bit more about the reporting on your lodging tax grant. If you are awarded a grant, tracking your data, we'll look at that a little bit more on the next slide. But when you're ready to receive your grant funds, you'll need to submit a narrative report, which will need to show how you spent the funds and talk a little bit about the success of the project and how the funds impacted your project. That state reporting form that I mentioned, and an invoice. So those are 3 separate pieces that are required before you can receive your reimbursement. There's that email again, and all reports and invoices are due to the city by December 31st of this year. So we looked at that state reporting form, and so planning for collecting data upfront is important. You'll need to be able to estimate and direct count your participants to your event or project. You may look at collecting zip codes so you understand where people are coming from. Are they coming from 50 or more miles away? Sometimes a zip code can help tell you that information. It's also something that you can ask. And then asking questions about whether they're staying overnight and whether they're staying in local lodging. So, or a local hotel or motel or a lodging business. Most folks do some sort of targeted surveying or questions for how to get this kind of data, and then are making estimated reports in that state reporting form. And again, happy to walk through any of that with potential applicants. So that's the end of our slideshow. I'm going to stop sharing now and see if there are any questions, or if Councilmember Rowe would like to share anything additional.
No, thank you. That was a thorough presentation. But I'm looking, I don't see any questions out there from the audience. And of course, you have that address, ltac@cityofpt.us, if you want to ask any questions, and all of the materials are going to be on the city's website, including a recording of this webinar. So we wish you good luck with your application, and we look forward to hearing about your proposals.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And thank you so much, Owen. And thank you, Alyssa, City Clerk, for putting together the webinar. Appreciate you.
Right.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Shelley and Alyssa. Bye.